Hello, fellow readers. My name's Levi, and this is a channel about my rekindled love for reading. I wanted to put something out this weekend and had something planned but didn't quite get to finish it, so stay tuned for that. But I went around and bought a lot of books this weekend, so I figured I could just show some off to you guys. I don't imagine this video will be too long or anything like that, but if you want to see some cool used books that I managed to pick up and maybe one of them will be a cool read for you, then stay tuned. So I should note that all these books were purchased from used bookstores and thrift stores, so they're all used. I didn't pay a lot of money for any particular copy. I think a couple of them were close to $10, but most of them would be below that. And yeah, there's a decent mix of different genres in here, so decent chance there'll be something for just about anyone who clicks on this video, hopefully. If you like, there's some different fantasy, some historical fiction, and some horror type stuff that we have. So without further ado, I guess we just get into a book. So let's start off with this one right here, since it's the closest one to me. The first one I picked up was Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. It's the second book in the Fits in the Fool trilogy by Robin Hobb, which is part of her bigger series, The Realm of the Elderlings, but that is made up of different trilogies, and I think there's some quadrology in there too, possibly. So this one is, I believe this is later in the series. I don't know exactly what number book this is, but I kind of just pick these up when I see them. Let's see if you can get a good look at that. Is that focusing? So yeah, there you go. Decent spine, I'd say. Yep. All right. Don't know why I'm showing you the back. That doesn't really matter. But like I said, I basically pick these up whenever I see them, because it's a series that I want to read. I've heard really good things about, and so far I've only read the first book of these, but I have picked up a decent bit of them just by picking them up when I see them here and there. So yeah, that's the first book. Oh, I guess I should mention also that this is kind of a fantasy book. So Realm of the Elderlings, I believe, is like a very beautifully sad kind of fantasy story from the first book that I read. But I think that it's a great book to read in general if you're a fantasy reader, or if you like just a good, poignant story, I'd say. Because Robin Hobb has very good prose from what I've seen. Like I said, I've only read the first book, but I really enjoyed it and actually gave that book 5 stars. Moving on with the same stack, kind of have it broken up in different stacks here. We have The Long Walk by Richard Bachman. I believe this was originally published as a Bachman book, but we have Stephen King on here because Richard Bachman was Stephen King's pseudonym that he published some books under at one point. I've heard that he did that to try to see if he could publish books without using his name, because at this point he was already pretty famous, but I don't know the truth of that. Let's take a look at the cover. There we go. Spine. I'm just going to show you guys the cover from now on. I don't think you really care to see the spine or anything like that, but don't know much about this book. Just heard this was a really good Bachman book. I think it's one of the more slept-on books from what I've read about Stephen King's work. I believe it's almost like a battle royale style book where we have a bunch of people. It's 100 people, I believe, and they are just basically have to walk 4 miles per hour until the last one is standing. That's all I know. But that premise alone sounds pretty enticing, and I imagine when Stephen King does it, it'll be exhilarating. So this is one I'm actually really excited to get to. I think I'll probably be getting to this one sooner rather than later. And yeah, so maybe you see some review or hear me talking about this book at some point if you stay tuned to the channel. I should note that we have 16 books, so I'm going to try to keep things as brief as I can. I'm not going to go crazy into explanation because some of these are new to me. I haven't read any of these books, so I can't really say too much about them, but I'll give you what I do know. Our next book that we have is Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I believe I'm saying that. Hopefully I'm saying that right. So really don't know too much about this book. I just know this book is supposed to be very beautiful. I think this was originally written in another language. I want to say Spanish. I've heard it's a very good book. It's compared to Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco and things like that. And while I haven't read that book yet, these are both on my radar because I've heard they're very beautiful and they're murder mystery type stories, which sound really interesting. I haven't really read too many murder mysteries, and it being a classic that's very renowned, I think this is a very good place to start. I found a copy of this for I think it was $1 and figured might as well just pick it up. This is also one that I'm very excited to read, so this will probably be read sooner rather than later because I really wanted to get to this one. And I read the back of it and it sounds very interesting. Basically about a guy who's in mourning and finds comfort in a specific book, and then he tries to go find more books from this author and ends up finding that a lot of his books have seemed to be missing or destroyed, and he may possibly have the last book in publication of this author, and it leads him down a mystery where there's murder and different things, trying to figure out what happened to the guy that wrote this book and why all of his books are missing, which in itself sounds really interesting, and then it also has really good reviews. So this is one I'm definitely very excited to look into. Let's see where we want to go next. So next up, we have another historical fiction type thing. I don't know if this is actually historical fiction, but it kind of gives me that vibe. It may not be. I think it's more of a fiction story, but I think it's kind of like a timepiece I believe it's set in 1945 Barcelona, so it's somewhat of like a timepiece historical fiction type thing. But this is definitely a lot heavier on the historical fiction. We have Killer Angels by Michael Shahara. Shahara? Yeah, hopefully I'm saying that right. And this book, from what I understand, is a Civil War historical fiction book. I hate the glare on that. Yeah, unfortunately, it's just some bad glare because it's like a glossy cover. But it is what it is. It's a historical fiction book about Gettysburg and the American Civil War. And that's about all I know. I've heard it has really good reviews. And a lot of historical fiction books that I've picked up, it's a genre that I've wanted to read more of. I have picked up a couple different books from this genre, but haven't actually gotten to too many. And a lot of them aren't based in the Civil War. So this one seemed interesting to have a different time period. So yeah, that's about all I know about that one. If you guys have read any of these books or have any things to say about them, definitely let me know. Moving on to the next one, we have an author that I have read 4 books of. I've read 4 books of this author, and that is Sir Terry Pratchett, and I found a copy of Small Gods. So don't know much about this specific book. I know it's like a standalone type book, and set in the Discworld universe, which if you don't know the Discworld universe or Terry Pratchett as a whole, he has this very satirical fantasy universe where we are in this whimsical type environment that has like 2 flying turtles through space that have 4 elephants on their back that are carrying the flat world. That's why it's called Discworld. It's a very interesting and witty book series from what I've read. I've read the first 2 in this, and then Guards and Going Postal, and I've enjoyed all of them. Definitely enjoyed Guards and Going Postal a bit more than the first 2, but I think that's not an unfair or uncommon opinion based on what I've seen. But I don't know too much specifically about Small Gods. I don't even know which character we're technically following in this book. But nonetheless, it's a Terry Pratchett book, so I'm excited to get to this one when I get a chance. Next up, we have 2 books that kind of go together, so I'm just going to do them at the same time. And I don't know too much about these books, but we have Ilium and Olympus by Dan Simmons. So let's see. I'll show you each one once at a time. Olympus, this is the 2nd book in the series, I believe. And then we have Ilium, which is the 1st book. So what to say about these books? I know Dan Simmons is known for his Hyperion series, which I have a copy of and want to read as well. But I don't know too much about these books. In fact, when I picked these up, I actually thought these were like historical fiction. But I'm realizing now, right before this video, these are actually science fiction. So I really don't know anything about them. If you know anything about them, let me know. But nonetheless, I was happy to pick those 2 up. Next up, we just picked up a classic for $1. I'm not going to go into details about this, but it is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm sure you've heard of this book. I believe I really don't know much about it, to be honest, even though it is a classic. I think it's like philosophy heavy, but that's about all I know. It's pretty short, so it's something that I'll get to eventually, and for $1, I was like, might as well just pick it up while it's there. Next up, we have a author that has made some headlines recently, but personally, I'm kind of a proponent that you can kind of separate art from the artist, so that's why I picked up this book. I've heard this is a very good writer, and I've read one of his other books, and I did enjoy it, but I think that there's been some problematic stuff that he's done, but nonetheless, he's very well known, and I picked up a copy of Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Let's get the cover there. This is separate from what Neil Gaiman himself has done, and I don't condone or support that, but the book, nonetheless, it's a Norse mythology book. That's about all I know. It's based on some mythology, and growing up, I really liked like the Percy Jackson books and stuff like that. I've always enjoyed mythology in general, so this is a book that definitely piqued my interest. All right, we're getting down to the wire a little bit. So next up, we have this book. Also paid like $1 for it, and it is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Don't really know anything about this book. From what I've read on the back, it seems like it's about some people who are traveling, and they're in kind of like a troupe type thing, which sounds interesting, but I don't know more than that. I have very little knowledge of this book. I just know that it's good. And when I went to check out, the person at the bookstore was like, oh, I've heard this book was good. And then also my girlfriend was like, oh, I've heard this book was good. So I guess that's a good sign. The 2 people who've seen this copy of this book, other than me, have both said good things about it. But other than that, I don't really know much, but nonetheless, I'm excited to get to this. It's a pretty short read, and it's more of like a literary fiction book, I think, which I don't have too much in here. I mean, there's some, but there's a lot of fantasy and historical fiction elements also involved in a lot of the books that I picked up. I'm realizing now that I've left a lot of Stephen King books out, so we'll just kind of go through those. The first up one I have here is Elevation by Stephen King. This is a really short little novella type thing. I don't know anything about this book, to be honest. I just know it's set in Castle Rock, and I want to like kind of understand. I have a video idea for kind of going through Castle Rock's history and stuff like that in Stephen King after watching the Castle Rock TV show. That's about all I know. I think this is a recent book. I think it was released in about 2018, and for $2, a little hardcover book, you can't really go wrong. So, and it's a Stephen King book, so picked it up, and I'll read this eventually. It's a little novella. Now, another Stephen King book that I picked up was this big guy, The Dark Tower. So I know this is the 7th book in the series. Let's get a shot of the cover. But nonetheless, I've been picking up these books as well whenever I see them because I really like this set. I don't know what this set is called. It's like a later on, more modern print of The Dark Tower, but nonetheless, I think they look really cool. So I just kind of pick up these printings whenever I find them. And this is The Dark Tower. I didn't have this one before. I have a couple of the other ones in the series, and I haven't started this series yet, but I do plan on doing it hopefully soon. If you watch my previous video, you'll know that I really enjoy Stephen King's writing, and so yeah, Dark Tower seems like a place that I should probably enjoy. I enjoy fantasy, and I enjoy Stephen King, so clearly this is something that I should get into. And this is the final book in the series, the big chunky one. But I don't know anything about The Dark Tower in general. It's somewhat shrouded in like mystery for me, but I know that there's a lot of connections to Stephen King's other books, which makes me want to read a lot of other Stephen King's books before I get to The Dark Tower. But maybe I'll just approach The Dark Tower at some point and start reading it. So this is a book that I have to have if I want to do that. Our last Stephen King book that we have is... Actually, you know what? We won't do this one yet. Instead, we will do these 3. So I picked up these 3 books as well. Let me see if get them all. I already had the first book in this series, so figured I might as well pick up the other 3. They were only like $2 a piece anyways at the place that I was at. And these are the books of... I can't hold all 3 at the same time, but they're the books of a series called The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. Castell maybe? De Castell, I think. Let's get the covers. That's the 3rd one, Saint's Blood. Did I say 3rd? It is 3rd. Okay. We have the 2nd one, Night's Shadow. And then we have the 4th one, which is Tyrant's Throne. So I really don't know anything about this series too much. I was caught by the cover on the first one and picked that up as a result. I think I've heard someone mention it before. It seems to be more of like a little later, like almost like Renaissance type fantasy, just based on the pictures, but I don't know that for sure. Yeah, I don't know too much about this series, but the covers look really interesting, and it's a fantasy series, so I'm all in. I'll pick this up at some point, and so I picked up the last 3 for really cheap, because I already had the first one. And the last book that I picked up over this week was another Stephen King book, and this one I was actually really excited to find, because I've heard very good things about this book. I think this is another one that I've heard is very slept on, and because I kind of own a lot of Stephen King's more popular books already, so I've been looking for a little bit of the deeper cuts, and this was one that I've heard some people say is their favorite book in Stephen King, which is very interesting. So this book is Duma Key by Stephen King, and oh my gosh, this cover is just beautiful. Let's see if we can show you everything. I'm sure you've seen it if you are a Stephen King fan, but we have like a coastal shot right here with some lightning and a tackle box, and then it continues on the side, and then you have this back shot, which I have no idea what even this is on the back, but it is very captivating and just looks beautiful with the sunset and the water, and then you have like this frog jumping and everything, and I don't know, I really like the cover art for this book. And I don't know too much about this book specifically. It seems like it's about someone who gets sent away to an island due to something therapist related, from what I read in the summary on the inside of the dust jacket, but I don't know too much more than that. But nonetheless, I've heard it's a really good one, so it's one that I'll definitely read soon, and I'm really excited to have a copy of it, especially one as beautiful as this. So that's basically all the books that I've picked up. I normally don't buy this many books, but I went out to a couple of places and picked up a lot of books for really good deals, so I can't really complain too much. Let me know if you've read any of these books or you have any recommendations in regards to them or anything to say about them in general. I should note that I had an idea that I wanted to actually release this week. I'm trying to kind of shoot for one video a week or so, but I unfortunately didn't get to finish everything for that, so it's still a work in progress, but I'm hoping to have that out for you guys next week, and it'll be about a book that I finished a couple weeks back that I really enjoyed and did a really big deep dive into. So I hope that you guys will stay tuned for that, and I appreciate you guys for watching if you made it this far. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.